So yeah, you hear a lot about how adopting the right mindset will help people improve their performance, increase the sense of well-being, achieve their goals. You know, there's a lot of discussion here about having the right mindset, which is what we're going to talk about today. And before we jump in and explore that, I thought I would just offer up a definition which is borrowed from Mindset UK. And they describe it as a set of beliefs that affects how we think, how we feel, and how we behave, which is, you know, quite a nice sort of introduction to it, hopefully. And I'm going to come to you for your thoughts on it and your definition in a minute. But I guess the other place people will have heard or read or seen TED videos about mindset sort of more recently is through the work of Carol Dweck and Stanford University, the work she did there around growth mindset, fixed mindset, which is a useful way to anchor how somebody sees their ability to change and learn and develop and all those sorts of things. And I sometimes think to the uninitiated, this idea of have a growth mindset, you know, can feel like a philosophical debate or a philosophical endeavor, but all of this is backed up by science. It's backed up by research, empirical research, that shows that when we adopt the right mindset, we're more likely to achieve that thing or achieve that growth or whatever it might be, and has an impact in relation to achievement. But maybe we can get into that in more detail in a moment. What would be your definitions of mindset, and beyond that, how it can affect performance?
So I struggled with this one. I was kind of thinking about this, and then I looked at it as a bit of your window on the world or your view, and I'm going to say that impacts on your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings, and that I really like the definition of the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So with the fix, are you know, do you always focus on things in one way and that's the way to do it, or do you look at the other thing or different ways that you could be doing things? And whether this is the right kind of analogy to use, but I thought about driving a car. So when you're driving a car, your focus is on the road and the distractions, and you shouldn't be looking at anything else. So that was my kind of a bit of fixed mindset. I'm paying attention to the road, I'm paying attention to distractions. When I'm sitting in the passenger seat, I might be looking around a bit more and looking at the other things that the driver might not normally see. But then if I'm walking the same path and I've got more time and I pay attention to the stuff that's around me, you see things that you don't normally see. So I think about, I've got a property on the Isle of Wight, and I drive down around the village loads of times to get to the property. But yet when I go and walk around it, I see so many different things because I'm looking around. And I thought, oh, I didn't realise that property had that, or they've got that in the garden, or I didn't even realise that one was there. So it's that mindset bit, and whether I'm describing this in the right way, but it's that window. What do we take the time to look at, to feel, to think about, and are we open to different? That growth mindset is being open and looking at other different things rather than following that same view and that same look, because that's the way I always do it, so that's the way I'm going to continue to do it. So I'm not sure if that's a good kind of definition or kind of that's my take on it.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? That window on the world. I quite like that. And then that kind of taps into that bigger, and not to get distracted, but it does tap into that whole belief system, the values, the way we've been brought up, our world view, which we think is so kind of interwoven in everything we do, and to a degree it is. But it's also, like you said, Ali, that possibility that we don't always have to think or feel or do that we've always done before. So I think when I looked at the definition, it was a similar one to the one you've brought up, Stephen, that kind of, a set of established beliefs and thoughts. And for me, the two key words are established and set. Because then I thought, are they set? I understand a set of, like a deck of cards. I think that's what they mean when they're talking about that definition. But it made me think of, is it set? And no, of course it isn't set. It doesn't have to be set, does it?
Mm.
The way that we've kind of experienced the world so far may have been useful, and it may have limited in some in certain respects. And we can choose at any point to kind of evolve or tweak or amend that view of the world or our experience so far, and adopt a slightly different view and experience of the world. So for me, it's very much about that kind of, nothing is set in stone. We've all got the possibility of change. We can all evolve. And for me, it's key that kind of, I'm not there yet. I'm not an expert yet. I haven't mastered French yet. I haven't mastered going to the gym on a regular basis 3 times a week yet, but I'm working towards. So for me, I think that's the crucial bit, the yet bit.
Okay. Yeah, I think my definition, for me, in the coaching context, is it's around exploring negative patterns of thinking, their impact, and how you change them. That's it for me. And I think Ali's analogy of the car, mine's, we each wear a different pair of filtered sunglasses, and depending on our programming depends on how we view the world. I got really fascinated by neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and basically how we can change our thinking. We can create new neural pathways, and I just found this to be so empowering personally for myself. You can change a thought, you can change the outcome, you can change a behavior. So for me, this is a massive part of coaching, and actually I find this so exciting because it just gives people hope. You may well have thought that belief since you were 7, and you may have been running that neural pathway all that time, but you can create a new pathway, you can create a new thought, and therefore that thought becomes a belief. So for me, this is a hugely empowering part of coaching, that it gives people hope. You can do it, you can change. And there's so much science, as you mentioned, Stephen, you know, the whole subject of neuroplasticity, and you know, they said you can't teach a dog new tricks. Well, you can do it, and there's plenty of proof and science to back that up. So this is a really interesting topic in relation to coaching.
Yeah, because it can, again, my experience of observing people, and if we use growth and fixed as our jumping off point, people who have a fixed mindset, and it's really entrenched in some people, in that it's not a case of them taking a different perspective. They don't even know another perspective exists. Do you know what I mean? It's just, that's the way it is. And you know, that thing over there that seems unobtainable, that's for other people, you know, not for me. That's the way the cards were dealt, and forever I will be, you know, whatever I am at the moment. But you're right, the science behind it's really interesting, isn't it? And you mentioned neuroplasticity, and I wouldn't call myself an expert, but from what I've read and absorbed over the years, by the age of about 7 or 8 or something, we've pretty much made our view of the world. I think I'm right in saying, in terms of all the neural connections that I made. And that can take a bit of, you know, unwiring, unlearning things. But you're absolutely right. It's quite empowering to know that, yeah, we absolutely can. The brain is very capable of making those new connections, of learning new things. But it's got to be primed too. And when we're in a fixed mindset state, that doesn't exactly put us in a good position to do some of that unlearning or rewiring or whatever it might be. But it is quite powerful, isn't it? This beliefs, since you start talking about beliefs and feelings, and then we act on those feelings. That's the interesting thing. We start to believe things that make us feel a certain way about a situation, like I'm not good enough or I'll never get there, and we act on it. And some of those beliefs are half truths at best. You know, they're not things that should be anchoring our decision making, but they tend to. So yeah, what impact have you seen this have on performance for people you've worked with? I mean, it could go one of 2 ways. It could keep people where they are, but equally, it could shift somebody's opportunities, decisions significantly, fundamentally. So what experiences have you seen when someone either has or hasn't made a shift in terms of their mindset?
I think it can stop people from doing things. I think if you've got a limiting belief that I'm not good enough, or you know, whatever it is that you're you're telling yourself. And the word that came up for me just when I was listening to some of that is the narrative. What's the narrative that you say to yourself? And you hear a lot about, people create a narrative about themselves. And there's a bit in the mind, what's the narrative that we're telling ourselves? So I've seen it where people haven't gone for jobs or put themselves forward for different opportunities, taken a leap of faith because they don't feel that they're good enough. They can do that, that no, I can only do this. I can't do anything else. They may be quite judgmental. People can be judgmental about approaching different things, and that can impact on performance, I think, and relationships. But on a positive note, when people are open to different things and open to change, and you can there's almost that bit, oh my gosh, I never thought I could do that. But actually, by thinking about it differently or feeling about it differently, it then can have almost like a chain reaction on other things.
Mm.
Do you think, I'm just thinking, do we think it's helpful to have a role model? Because I'm just wondering, it's one thing to kind of think or imagine or half hope or aspire. And I'm just wondering the role of coaching and other supportive networks, particularly when we're making big changes in careers or health or fitness or whatever, having that role model or someone to turn to or seeing someone else in action. So we might have had a fixed mindset or a view of the world, a narrative that we've grown up with where that isn't for me. Going to a posh gym isn't for me, or paying someone to help me exercise isn't for me, or whatever. And I'm just wondering if that role modelling, seeing other people do things, seeing other people achieve, whether that inspires and gets that bit of movement. So I think there has to be, thinking of Valley's chain reaction, there has to be a thought, yes, but then there also has to be something else that kind of moves that thought into action or whatever, and to make it more tangible and visible. So I wonder if being surrounded by people, people often, there's a principle, isn't there? You kind of aspire, you socialize with the people you want to be, you network with the kind of roles that you want to, be working in a year's time or whatever. And I wonder if there's that almost that osmosis, that aspiration, that inspiration that we get from surrounding ourselves with role models that are of the same growth mindset.
I think that's brilliant, and I think that's certainly the case for me in my career. Just looking for people that I aspire to be like, and then hooking onto that. Well, if they can do it, I can do it, and especially if you can relate to that individual. Well, if they can do it, then I definitely can do it. I think there's something massive in that, having a role model for us all in progressing. One of the things that I used to do, or still do, with my coaching clients is what I call an evidence log. So, apologies. I get them to create an evidence log where that helps them reshape their thinking. It's evidence, of their success and their journey, and it starts to. There's proof in the pudding. They can see it, and it shows that progression and helps to create those new neural pathways. But I love the role modelling, Louise. I think that's a brilliant point to bring up.
Yeah, definitely, because the behaviour you tend to see, I'm just picking out one from a person or even a group who have developed a fixed mindset, is whenever there's feedback delivered to them, it's seen as an attack. It's certainly not welcome. It's not, it's not seen as, oh, well, this will help us get better then. So you do see the sort of behavioral manifestation of where people's heads are at. And I think it's contagious, that stuff. Yeah, I agree. I think if you work in that environment, lots of people in the same way, you might assimilate and not necessarily a positive way. But if the culture of the team or just the people around you is not that, and it's open, and we'll not always get it right, but that's part of the journey, that type of thing. It's okay to make mistakes because we learn from it within reason. You don't want to make any catastrophic ones, but if that's the kind of discussion and the way things get done around here, the people you surround yourself with. Yeah, I never thought about that before, but I can see how that would definitely make an impact. Yeah,
it's that cliche, isn't it? Behaviour breeds behaviour.
Yeah.
And if whether that's a negative or whether it's positive, and I think that role modelling piece is seeing people like you doing it and achieving it, and that kind of makes you think, well, yeah, if they can do it, I can do it.
I used to do a lot of mastermind groups in my business days, and that was that. It was just mixing with like-minded people, or people that were slightly, ahead of you, and that would obviously they'd share their secrets, but it was more than that. It was being surrounded by those people with those those beliefs, the beliefs that you're trying to adopt. So yeah.
How much can a coach be that positive role model, do you think, in a non-directive, non-judgmental way, as we would be managing those sorts of boundaries? But how much of a role model could the coach be, do you think?
That's a really interesting, because we know what the right answer is, but there's also an element of that. In reality, you will have those clients, coachees, that will look to you. I'm not going to say look up, but they will look to you for an element of inspiration, aspiration, and a little bit of that cheerleading, celebrating success. And when it's appropriate in small doses, I'm kind of okay with that. So I think there is a bit of that dynamic and relationship that can be beneficial, but I'm really trying to choose my words very, very carefully in that.
I'll tell you the reason for my question, and you're right, there is a kind of obvious, well, yes, of course there can be. But on a previous conversation, Louise, you mentioned sort of collusion, which tends to happen in, just talking to friends about these types of things, just sometimes by the virtue of being an objective voice, being the sort of person who asks the questions of why not. It sort of breeds possibility, as opposed to they might not be getting that input. So it's not necessarily cheerleading from the sides or anything like that, but just by virtue of being there and asking the objective questions with positive intent. That might be what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way, is they don't get that elsewhere potentially, so that could, in a roundabout way, provide that to them.
And that was going to be my response, that actually we create the space
Right,
for that kind of conversation. So that's kind of where I was kind of
that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, let's by asking those lovely questions, giving them the opening the possibilities up. So that would be my sort of answer to that. That's a difficult question though. Yeah.
It's that healthy challenge bit, like you say in the wine, whether it's devil's advocate, whether it's you as a coach in an ideal world, you come in with the unfiltered look on that person, and just because they're telling you, well, I can't do it, doesn't mean that you have, if that's what they believe, doesn't mean that you have to believe that. So there is that place as a coach to kind of say, well why, like you say, why not, why couldn't you do it? I think but it's that bit about colluding and cheerleading, and you want to encourage them and you want to support them, but again, you don't, it's for them to take, they've got to take ownership and I suppose be their own cheerleader to some extent.
Yeah, but it's unpicking those limiting beliefs, as you mentioned, Ali, and that evidence log, Lou, that you mentioned, I think is crucial, isn't it? Tell me a time when. And then they unpick it and they tell the story and it worked out well. Okay, what skills did you use? What experiences did you use? What resources did you call upon? All of those things. And it reminds them that they've got it all in them and it's there ready to be tapped into. It's like sometimes I work with clients and just say, think of your lucky day. Well, of course, it's not a lucky day, is it? It's their skills, resources, experience, all of these things accounted to give them a great outcome and a brilliant day. But often we just think as humans it was just by chance that meeting led to that conversation that led to a job offer. A bit more to it than that, or whatever. So I think it's really important just to remind them that it's all within them, it's all there and just needs to be tapped into and perhaps brought together in a bit more of a meaningful, purposeful way, but they've got everything that they need at their fingertips. It's about kind of calling upon it, using it, a bit of discipline and a bit of focus.
Yeah. So just to get really specific for a moment then, what experiences have the three of you had where, within the course of a conversation, you've realized that mindset is a factor, that it needs to be challenged, and it's appropriate to do so. How did you go about it? What would be your strategy for working with a client? I know it's difficult to generalize because everybody's is different and all that sort of things. But from a high level perspective, how would you go about challenging someone's mindset? How do you help them work through that so they can see the possibilities?
I think, if I can go first, I think just important to say a permission piece here before we start delving into the inner workings of someone's mind. I think we have to just be mindful as coaches that we get permission before we ask the difficult questions. And I think also as coaches, we're listening for language, verbal, non-verbal cues, aren't we? We're listening for repetitive words. Oh, I can't do that. We're just listening, and I think subtly listening, and that enables you then to challenge. I think I've always got a 4-step plan, 3-step plan, 30 days. That's just me. But I'm going to share my 4-step plan very, very briefly. So if someone is presenting and they're sort of, that there's a limiting belief, I think the first thing is, first of all, exploring what the limiting belief is, or that. And when I say belief, I mean thought. A repetitive thought becomes a belief. Let's just be clear on that. So when we talk about beliefs, it's just a series of repetitive thoughts that form a hardwired belief. So step 1 is about exploring what they are, and normally that's in a specific area: career progression, confidence, relationship, whatever it may be, and really nailing what that limiting belief actually is. Put words to it. I believe this about myself. And often when you distill it, it's I'm not good enough to in some form or another. So I think step 1 is about what is the limiting belief that is holding me back and causing me pain. Second thing is examining the impact, and I think this is really important to do. Now, we're not therapists, so we're doing this briefly. We're not going into their history in too much depth. But I do think examining its impact, where it may have come from, how that's impacting them in the past, or how it has impacted them in the past, current and future. If you continue to hold this belief, what's the long-term impact going to be? And often just asking that question is enough for someone to go, oh no, that can't happen. It really kind of I don't know, puts a rocket, and they're like, I need to change. Yes, this cannot happen. It's going to stop me progressing, stop me finding love, stop me getting, the career, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's the second step, is examining the impact. Step 3 is about, well, what's the new belief? What's the new thought? Let's start with that little new thought, that new neural pathway. What's the new thought that you need to think? And that then hopefully over time becomes the new belief. And the final step for me is, well, what do we do to rewire and reprogram? Actually, what's the strategy? And there's loads of things, and maybe that's a subject for another time, but things like evidence logs, things like taking action that you're scared of. Quickest way to change a belief and create a new neural pathway is just go out there and do it. And visualization, there's loads of science around visualization and how that can actually rewire the brain. So I think, just in summary, it's about what is the limiting belief, what impact is it having, what's the new belief, and then how do we embed that, how do we actually rewire the brain? And that's certainly my approach with working with a client. But first of all, it starts with permission. Actually, do they even want to go down that path? Do they want to explore? Because some people aren't open to it, and others are like, yeah, bring it on. So yeah,
Picking up on that bit you said, and yeah, definitely. And it's funny, I'd never put it into a step-by-step process, but yes, I've done all those things. And I think that bit you were saying about that visualization, I know I was working with a client who, it was a past work situation that was, and the belief from that and her behavior, it was impacting on her behavior, and everything was about this situation, this person, this situation, and it was just a continual all of the time. And we I'll try and make this short, but we did a bit of visualization. We ended up putting that scenario, it went in a bag, and then obviously we're not encouraging anyone to throw rubbish or anything like that, but the rubbish, the bag got thrown into the river, and the bag, and she was watching the bag go away. And we talked about, well, what if the bag, and everything, it was in the bag, it had gone, and what if it come back, and our first few coaching sessions had been almost consumed by this particular topic, and we spent a lot of time with this bag going into the river and it going off. And we came back to the next session, and we were about half an hour in, and I'm thinking, she's not talked about this situation. And it kind of came to appropriate time for me to pick up. And I said, but what about this? She said, oh no, she said, it's in the bag, it's gone. She said, it went down the river and it's gone. And we kind of explored, and she said it was that visualization of it going away. She said it went, and I realized that it didn't have to come back, and it had gone. She said, and if I start to think about it, I just think about the bag and it's gone. And you kind of, at the time, you think, oh, let's try it and let's have a play with it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that was really, really, really effective. And I think something that happened for me when I was being coached, again, all of those different steps, and it was one question that the coach asked me, and it was, what's the reality of this situation? And it was something that had been in my mind that was clouding my thoughts. When I had a thought, it's kind of this negative, and I kind of didn't want it to be there. And when they asked me that question, what's the reality of the situation? And I actually said some words out loud. It was kind of like, why am I letting this occupy my mind and my thoughts? And just by that one question made me think differently. So whenever, very rarely, this thing comes up, I think, and I say the two lines that I said back to that question, and it's like, yeah, gone. And you kind of think, wow, can it happen? It does. It does. And I think it's so powerful.
Sometimes just shining a light on a limiting belief is enough, which is what you're describing, enough to sort of disperse it, and actually no further work is needed. I think that, but it's bringing that awareness, isn't it? Shining that light and asking the right questions that someone goes, yeah, why have I been letting that hold me back all these years?
How spooky. Just before you said that about shining a light, in my head I was thinking it's like flicking a switch on. There you go. So yeah.
I like the combination of the kind of the headspace stuff. So Ali, that you've kind of described it, it's kind of that visualization and some of that headspace stuff, but then also tapping into what you said, Lou, earlier about taking action. So for me, that is absolutely much more my favoured personal way of dealing with things. So I either distract myself with something else, or I set myself a challenge, or I just physically create a new habit or routine. And I'm a big believer in the body, the physiology affects the psychology. The body actually affects the psychology. So it's not the other way, and it can be the other way around, but it's massively proven that it's much more powerful and quicker for the body to instigate a change in our psychology, which is why exercise is prescribed for anxiety and low mood. All of those kind of things. It's not just go for a walk and you'll feel better. Genuinely, you will feel better. So there's loads and loads of science behind that. So for me, I'm a big believer in the taking action, something, just shaking it up, just making it feel and look different. But it's a combo, isn't it? And everyone responds to different things. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. There was the EMCC did a global conference before Christmas, and Dr. Celine Mullins, shout out to her, who did a brilliant session on exactly that, how the physiology, the science behind the physiology affecting the mind and stuff is really interesting. Just hearing all three of you describe sort of different approaches and some creative styles, sometimes just shining a light on it, sometimes again having that robust plan. It just reminds me, it's back to almost the basic premise of why we're all coaches and what it's about, in that how in situations like this, how ineffective telling is or direction is. Do you know what I mean? Because again, if somebody goes with let's say someone does have an awareness, but it's still a limiting belief and they're doubting themselves because of it, and they share it with somebody else, they'll probably receive well-meaning yet empty platitudes of, well, don't worry about it, you'll be great, just do it. Things like that, which, as I say, are well-meaning, but don't even scratch the surface in terms of having an impact on how somebody feels about themselves or their situation or how they see the world or whatever. But going back to your really, your four-step plan, Lou, in particular, we're getting them to think, aren't we? Okay, it's about raising awareness, but you have to do the work here. You have to do the thinking. It's ultimately you who has to shift your perspective. No one else can really do that for you. Do you know what I mean? So I know that's coaching 101, not to tell, but it's just conversations like this that really remind me of the stark difference between what they'll probably get outside of coaching and what they'll get into coaching. So again, I always like to ask this question when we're talking about these sorts of things, but success stories, I mean, people you've worked with, what kind of impact has this had when the things you've just described, whether it's the sort of creative stuff, Alison, you talked about, the visual things, or whatever it might be, what successes have we had with clients when they've made that shift in perspective, when the mindset has changed to something that's more open, more positive, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, oh gosh. Yeah, lots of success stories. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever been through a coaching program with a client without touching on mindset at some point. I just want to say that I think it naturally comes up in coaching. Some clients want to delve right deep into that, others maybe not so much, which comes back to that permission piece. But yeah, I think it's a common conversation in coaching. Yeah, and for me, gosh, I can't think of any specific example, but loads of successes, working on limiting beliefs, helping people just shine that light can often be a catalyst to help them take that next step. So I haven't got any specific mindset stories other than, yes, clients have achieved goals and gone on to start businesses. I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes and stuff like that. And working on mindset has been very much part of helping them get there. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to Lou, really. I can't think of anything specific. I'm sure there are cases, but my memory is terrible. Lots of career stuff. So you might do something practical around maybe interview and selling yourself, but the mindset is a big piece of that kind of am I good enough for this job, am I fit for this job, this right organization. There's loads of different things. I don't think you could just identify one strand. It's a conversation that kind of is woven through lots and lots of coaching conversations. I think some of the mindset stuff for me it is intricately linked with a real permission too. So if someone believes they're allowed to be that person they aspire to be, that job is for me, I can do that, I can have a comfortable retirement because I've planned and saved, or I've been organised, or whatever it is that they aspire, that growth mindset has led them to. So that permission to give it to them, that permission to seek happiness and to make it happen for themselves, to seek financial security. So there's a bit about permission, I think, in that mindset stuff, and a bit about self-talk as well. And positive self-talk, and I use the quote things because I know it can be kind of banded around as quite fluffy or whatever, but I think the way we talk to ourselves and the way we view ourselves are big indicators of whether we're gonna deliver on what we want, we're going to achieve those goals and those successes. So they're all kind of interwoven for me, I think. I get the fluffy thing that gets leveled at a lot of developmental stuff, and that comes from a very cynical place, which ironically is quite a strong mindset that people can adopt as well. But I think the reality of the situation is the negative talk's going to happen whether you like it or not. So if you don't balance that out with something more positive or more pragmatic even, then that negative self-talk tends to happen. It's kind of a defense mechanism. It's a threat response. It's kind of, again, the way we're all wired, but some people are better at managing it than others, I think. Ali, anything you'd like to add in terms of successes?
I suppose from my personal point of view of that question and how that changed my mindset and got rid of something that was bugging me, as created space for other things. And obviously the example that I use with the visualization, from somebody who had not a sort of fully positive outlook on her career going forward, I think there was quite a shift, and it actually opened her eyes to different things. But yeah, it's kind of hard to, and sometimes it's hard to quantify. But it is that change in mindset is really, really powerful, and I think, as I said earlier, it can lead on. It has a knock-on effect on other areas as well.
Yeah.
And there's almost like a permanency about it. I think, like you say, using that flicking the switch, you flicked it and it's there, it's obvious, and now everything looks different, and actually potentially by not flicking that switch back again, which I know can be challenging sometimes, but you know, moving forward with that new mindset, my God, the possibilities are limitless, aren't they? You know, it gets exciting again. You get energized by all of those possibilities to explore and to seize. So I think that there's almost like a permanency behind having that growth mindset. And a growth mindset doesn't mean that I'm an expert and I've sorted it and I'm permanently positive. It just means I have the possibility to make things happen successfully for me. You know, I've got the gumption to move forward in the way I want to move forward. That's all it means. It just gives the power back to us as individuals to drive and direct what we want out of life.